Hey, welcome to episode 2 of Real Life with Tom Noski, or Real Life with me. I finally got the podcast up on all podcast platforms, so it is now out on iTunes and Spotify. So if you did enjoy listening last week, if you did enjoy listening and watching the podcast, and you are more of a Spotify user or you are more of a iTunes user, well, that is now available to you. There's just one thing and one favor that I want to ask of all of you if you are listening to the podcast. If you listen on Spotify, I would really appreciate if you could follow the podcast over there. And if you're listening over on iTunes, if you've ever enjoyed any of my work, if you've ever enjoyed any of my YouTube videos, if you've ever enjoyed any of my Instagram content, if you've ever enjoyed anything that I've put out into the online space, I would appreciate it more than you can imagine if you could leave me a 5-star review on iTunes, or leave the podcast a 5-star review on iTunes. Even if you listen on Spotify, or even if you're comfortable watching it on YouTube, head over to iTunes and leave me a 5-star review. If not, don't stress. Watching it or listening to it is more than enough for me. But if you are feeling generous, if you are feeling kind, head over and do that. But without leaving you or without taking up any more of your time, here's the podcast. Welcome back to the podcast. It feels pretty cool to say welcome back to the podcast rather than welcome to the podcast. I know that probably seems like nothing to a lot of people listening, and that seems like an irrelevant factor to open a podcast to, but honestly, I've been wanting to do this for so long that it feels unreal to be over that hump of getting over the first week and figuring out the kinks as far as how to post a podcast and honestly just getting the feedback on the first one. Like I wasn't nervous, but I was definitely. I'm going to have to practice my pronunciation. That's going to be the number one thing I need to figure out with podcasting. God damn, last week I spilled over my words a few times, but I was definitely excited about the feedback I was going to get. Not that I thought it was going to be positive, but I was excited to sort of get that out of the way, because I find it really natural. I find this sort of dynamic of podcasts very, very natural. But I can imagine there's a lot of people that don't find it as natural. Because, 90% of podcasts are a conversation between two people or someone telling a story. Like a lot of the, people really like either the true crime style where it's someone telling a story that's already scripted and whatnot, or the style of two people or a group of people sitting down and talking openly and candidly about, whatever a topic is, or interviews or whatever it is. So having a solo podcast, although there's plenty of very decent solo podcasts out there, I'm sure there was a lot of people that saw that I went for the solo route and were surprised. I think that the whole situation right now, like we covered a lot of it last week. I'm not going to talk about that this week. I'm going to try and stay away from the depressing elements of life. I might give a small update of what's going on here in Melbourne for those who are interested, who are watching from the rest of the world. But I think that, I would have definitely done a solo podcast regardless of the situation we're in at the moment. I'm definitely the type of person, I'm certainly the type of person who talks to themselves a lot. I probably shouldn't be saying that to a online audience, and I probably shouldn't be putting that out on the internet that I'm a little bit crazy, but I talk to myself a lot. Like there is multiple times a day where I find myself thinking up scenarios in my head, or having conversations with myself about things that I'm doing, or things like that. It's not anything crazy. I don't have other personas or anything like that. But, if you're like me, you understand what I'm saying, is that internal dialogue is very loud for me. My internal dialogue is very loud, and sometimes to the point where I'll actually verbalize that internal dialogue. So this sort of conversation feels very, very normal for me, to have a podcast where it's just me talking to camera and not having any dead air in between the conversations. Like I tell you what, I am absolutely in love with this format. I wasn't expecting to enjoy it as much as I did. Last week was just so much fun just to sit down and talk for 45 minutes. I really didn't expect to enjoy it as much as I did. It felt very, very natural. It felt very, very therapeutic. It felt like I was doing or creating in the way that I was meant to create. And I think that's really, really cool, because as much as I enjoy like YouTube videos and that sort of thing, like I'm getting there now to the point where a lot of my YouTube videos are very candid, but with that, 5 to 15 minute zone that you want to work inside for a YouTube video, it can very oftentimes feel like there's a pressure to perform in that short period of time. There's a pressure to squeeze as much value into those minutes as you possibly can. And for me, that materializes in the need to write a script, or the need to hit key points, and the need to do all of that sort of stuff in a video. And unfortunately, that leads to me scripting a lot of my videos. I wish I didn't, because it doesn't come across as candidly as this does. Like when I'm having a conversation with someone, it never rolls as well as some of my YouTube videos do. But it also sounds far better, both from just naturally. Like when you're having a conversation with someone, there's just the natural flow of conversation, which I think it lacks when you decide to script a video, which this doesn't. So I want to thank everyone that watched it. I was completely overwhelmed by the positive response that I got, and not only from my audience, but I had a couple of my friends share the podcast, a couple of my friends listen to the podcast, and a couple of people really say that they enjoyed it. So I was absolutely stoked to hear that. And then just from everyone, I think we've got like 150 listens on Spotify and iTunes and all the audio platforms, and then a couple hundred on YouTube, which isn't amazing numbers, but I was very, very stoked with the response that you guys gave. A lot of you said that it was very natural. A lot of you said that it was a good listen. And then just a lot of you said that, we're just positive. I wasn't nervous for releasing it, but I was definitely excited to see what you guys would have said, because releasing content in any form is difficult. That actually segues really nicely into what I wanted to speak about today. It's like releasing content in any form is difficult. I had a Zoom call last night with a bunch of creators, and we got onto the conversation of self-confidence and feeling self-conscious when releasing content and YouTube videos and that sort of thing. And the conversation steered towards just the idea that you can't waste your time caring about that sort of thing. You really cannot spend that energy doing that sort of thing, because life's too short. Life's way too short. It's like, if you're anything like me, if you're anything like anyone, like if you've ever thought about doing a podcast, if you've ever thought about starting an Instagram page, if you've ever thought about starting a YouTube channel, whatever it is, if you've ever thought about writing a song or writing a screenplay or doing literally anything, you've got to start it, and you've got to stop caring about what other people think. It's like I said something, or something came out of my mouth that I was very proud of last night. It's like, if you are that type of person that wants to do these things, and the thought of doing it is making you feel uncomfortable because you're worried about what a particular person might say to you or a particular person might think, well, then if that's a case of, if you have to go and see someone, if you have to have a conversation with someone about that, then get that conversation out of the way, because I guarantee you, no one actually cares as much as you think they care. No one actually cares about what you're doing the way that you care about what you're doing, because everyone else is so concerned with what they're doing that they don't have the time to care about what you're doing. And I think this stops so many people from doing what they want to do. Like every single conversation I have with someone is very often, people come up with situations, even I do. Like when I was talking about how I wasn't sure what direction I wanted to take my YouTube in. Of course, a lot of that was fact and a lot of that was true, but there was a certain element of it where I didn't want to make a video that would be judged by people. I didn't want to make a video that wouldn't be up to par with people. Like, it's crazy how much we can let other people affect us and let that control what we do. Like, I just think that if you want to do something and you feel like you shouldn't do it, or you feel like you can't do it because you feel like a particular person is going to think that, it's like, mate, if you have to go and see someone, if you have to go to therapy, if you have to go have a conversation with someone, even if you have to have a conversation with yourself, I think that's so important to get that out of the way and start creating. Because honestly, this life is short, but this life is incredibly, you have so much opportunity to do literally whatever you want to do. And I think a lot of people spend way too much of their time concerning themselves with things that don't matter, concerning themselves with shit that just doesn't matter. It's like I, for example, when I was in high school, I was an incredibly self-conscious kid. I got bullied a lot through primary school for being a little bit on the heavier side. I wasn't fat by any means. I wasn't obese or anything like that, but I was just a little bit bigger. That's the way I was. I grew slowly. So I grew out first and then I grew up. That was the way I went. And that's like a lot of people. A lot of people are like that. But obviously the kids that grow at a steadier pace through primary school are going to pick on the kids that don't grow at a steadier pace through primary school. So I was picked on quite a bit in primary school, to the point where I actually moved primary schools. And then I spent a lot of time through my secondary school kind of making amends with that. But the process of making amends with that meant that I really, really cared what other people thought of me. I really, really spent a lot of time caring what other people thought, to the point where I pandered to just about all of my friends, just about everyone that I was close with in high school. And unsurprisingly, I'm not super close with a lot of the people that I was close with in high school. With the exception of obviously a bunch. We all have a bunch, but it's ridiculous how much I cared and how much I pandered and how much every single thing that I did every single day was an attempt to make those people like me, when in reality those people weren't concerning themselves with me at all. Those people couldn't give a shit what I did, and I just thought that they cared. It's something that I think a lot of people really struggle with, and I think it's not worth it. I wrote this in my notes before, but I've recently listened to the book The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck again by Mark Manson. I listened to it again last month because I listened to that in January and it was an absolute game changer for me. So I thought I'd listen to it again. And there's a quote in it that I read again today. And I love it. It's you and everyone you know are going to die soon. And in the short amount of time between here and there, you have a limited amount of fucks to give. Very few, in fact. And if you go around giving a fuck about everything and everyone without conscious thought or choice, well, then you're going to be fucked. And I think that resonated really, really well with me, because he's right. It's like you've only got so much energy to give to other people before you're losing that energy that you should be giving to yourself. You've only got so much time on this planet. You've only got so much opportunity. You've only got so many chances to make the right choice. And not that, obviously every choice that you make, positive or negative, is going to lead to something else. So no choice is finite, obviously, with exception. Our time here is finite, but no choice is entirely negative, no choice is entirely positive, because every choice turns into something else. And all the most negative parts of my life have always turned into the most positive, and all the most positive have always turned into some form of negative. So it's just the way the cookie crumbles. But most of us, don't have enough energy to give to other people. We should be giving that energy to ourselves. And I think that was amazing. And I think another thing that we spoke about last night was that the key to how can I phrase this? I think action is the key to anything. If I think back to the times in my life where I have been the most focused, or if I think back to the times in my life, like right now, for example, is a period in my life where, surprisingly, considering everything that's going on, I'm the most productive I've been in a very long time. I'm getting a lot done. I feel very happy with my work. I feel very happy with my life. It's surprising, if I'm being completely honest with you, and that's the funny thing about life is how much or how random and how surprising this life turns out. It's like what I just said before. It's like every negative situation in my life, or most of them, have always inevitably turned out being a positive. Whereas every positive action has always, in some way, shape, or form turned into a negative. Not that that's a bad thing. I'm not worked up about that. I'm not avoiding positive things because of that, but it's the reality of how life works. It's like if you have one bad situation, that might lead you into a situation where you consider things a little bit differently, and then you're given an opportunity to do something. It's like, all the negative times where maybe a breakup, or maybe I'm not talking to a certain friend anymore, or maybe a fight that I had, or maybe something along those lines have always led me to meet new people, or consider different things when meeting people, or try to avoid certain situations that lead to those situations. You always learn from your situations. But if I think back to periods like right now, and periods like maybe 2 years ago when I first started doing this sort of thing, and all those very intense periods of progress in my life where I'm working a lot and not really giving myself the opportunity to pay any attention or give any energy to anyone else, which is not always a good thing. It's like sometimes, other people deserve your energy, and sometimes they don't. But if I really do think back to all those times, the common thing that makes a lot of sense is that action is the key to just about anything. And that goes for feeling self-conscious. It's like, if I could give any advice to, let's Jesse won't mind me saying this, but Jesse is, he brought up this conversation last night because he was talking about how he's feeling too self-conscious to create YouTube content. And he won't mind me saying this. I hope not. Jesse, if you do mind me saying this, I apologize, but he won't mind me saying this, or hopefully. And if I have any advice for him, is like, action is the key. It's like I think it's called the do something principle. And it's like, if you want to do something, you feel inspired to do something, and then you repeat. It's not the other way around. You don't become inspired and then you do something. And it's the same thing for just about everything else. I might be getting that wrong, but correct me I think it's called the do something principle, but it's the same thing with just about everything else. Action is the key to everything. And it's the same with feeling self-conscious. It's like, if you're feeling self-conscious about someone thinking about what they will think about your YouTube content, and you're not making any YouTube content, well, that feeling of self-consciousness is not going to disappear, because you're not giving any action to the issue that you have. Whereas if you just decide to make YouTube videos and give less of a fuck about what that person's thinking of you, or what your parent is thinking about you, or what your boyfriend is thinking about you, or what your girlfriend, or what your friend, or what your bloke back in high school is thinking about you, if you consume all of that time and all of that energy into making and actionable things, then that feeling is going to disappear. Like I said, if I think back to periods like right now, I don't have the energy to give to anything else. I don't have the energy to give to the negative aspects of my life. I don't have the energy to give to thinking about all the things that I could be doing with my time. Like, last night, I love going out every single week for a drink with my friends. That's one of the best parts of my week. I don't really consider myself a heavy partier. I don't even drink that much. As I say that, I've got a glass of wine here, but I really don't. When I go out with friends, I might have 5 or 6 drinks maximum, and then it's just the more I grow up, I used to drink a lot, but the older I get, the more I realize that I just don't need to have a good time. But I really do enjoy every single week. I really, really love going out with my friends. I love meeting new people. I'm a very social person, but I don't have the time to think about how much I'm missing that at the moment. If I'm making this content, if I'm thinking of new video ideas, if I'm planning this podcast, if I'm doing things that put me into a position where all I'm doing is doing, then I don't have the energy to care about that sort of thing. And it's the same thing if you're feeling self-conscious. If you are feeling self-conscious, if you're feeling stuck, if you're feeling restricted, action is the key to doing anything. Start, and then the answers will come. It's like, if you start doing something, then that'll present a whole new set of problems that you have to worry about that aren't even relevant to the problems you had before, and suddenly you don't care about that anymore. And I think that's an incredible hack if you are in a position where you don't feel like you can start, you feel stuck, you feel worried, you feel whatever, you feel anxious. Even right now, I think a lot of you would really benefit from just starting something. And it doesn't need to be anything crazy. It's like, maybe you start a new painting, or maybe you start making a new song, or maybe you start a vlog, or maybe you start a YouTube channel, or maybe you start an Instagram, or maybe you buy yourself a course, or maybe you do something, because action is what's going to help you find the answers to the problems that you have. It's just, it's been really eye-opening for me these last few weeks, because at first I was really stressed out about how I was going to deal with this time. And I think that it's okay to have those feelings. I think a lot of us have those feelings. And I think that's the fine line I'm trying to tread with my social media presence at the moment, because I'm really concerned about not coming across like I am sort of putting my blinders onto the whole situation. I really, really don't want to come across that way. And I said this last week, and I'm saying it again. I really don't want to come across like I'm putting my blinders on and just ignoring everything that's going on, because I'm not. I've just sort of, for the first week that all of this stuff was going down, and even for the months that it was sort of in the peripheral of everyone's consciousness, like, I was really worried. I was really anxious. I got depressed at one point because I just wasn't sure how I was going to cope. It's like, how I'm going to spend all of this time alone. And then my solution was to start. My solution was to keep myself busy. My solution was to take action. And I think that solved a lot. Like, of course, you need to spend some time acknowledging the problem. And I think that recognizing the issue and feeling the emotions that you're supposed to feel are okay, but letting it control your actions is not acceptable. Having a period of time where you feel a little bit down, maybe you let yourself watch a few more Netflix shows than you should, is okay. But after that point, not taking action is not acceptable. So if I've got any advice for anyone that's going through a little bit of a rough time right now, maybe you, I don't know, if for us single people, it feels pretty shitty right now because you are spending a lot of time by yourself. If you feel lonely, if you feel like you don't have any answers to anything going on, that's okay. Like, that's part of this. That's going to be part of this for the next few months. But I think that there's so much opportunity right now and so many ways that you can really take advantage of this time. And I think that it'd be stupid not to take advantage of this time. To bring this whole conversation back to something that's more actionable rather than than focused on right now, because I think that as much as it's valuable to talk about what's going on right now, and as much as it's valuable to bring these lessons back to right now, we're not always going to be in right now. We're not always going to be stuck inside. We're not always going to be out of a job. We're not always going to be given the opportunity to slow down, which is another thing. I think this period has been so good for forcing people to slow down. And I'll come back to the point that I was just trying to close on, but my God, like, that has to be one of the most valuable things that's come out of this whole situation is the ability to slow down. We all have time now. We all have, whether it's in our control or not in our control, which has forced a lot of us to really slow down and reconsider everything that we're doing. It's not, it's very rare, if at all. Like, I don't think this would happen at all. I really, really, really do not think that for me, this would have come up, or this would have happened, or this, I reckon if the world had continued going the way it was going, with the exception of obviously a few situations where there's a small stop, I really don't think I would have thought as hardly about everything that I'm doing as I am right now, because I've been forced into a situation where I have to slow down and really consider everything. Because everything has been put in front of me in one foul swoop. The entire world has stopped, and I've had everything that I'm doing and everything I'm going to do and everything I planned on doing put right in front of me. And now I have to assess everything. It honestly feels like I've got a table in front of me and I've got all the cards out on the table that my future, my past, my present, what I'm doing now, what I plan on doing, my goals are, what I want to achieve versus what I can realistically achieve, and everything in between. I have all of that sitting on a table in front of me. And now I have the opportunity, rather than someone coming and grabbing that one and all of a sudden, I've really got to get this one done. Like, that's desperate. This needs to be done really, really, frantically, rather than frantically trying to reorganize these cards whilst also, balancing something else with my other hand and then consciously thinking of something else that's going on over here. Now I have a genuine period of time where all I have to do is rearrange these cards. That's all I have to do. I don't have to focus on doing a certain thing and rearranging in a certain way because another person said that I should do it in this way, or I don't need to worry about rearranging to fit a certain shape because I can only do this for a certain period of time before I have to make this money or something. Like, I just have to rearrange these cards, and I think that's amazing. Like, that feels absolutely incredible right now. And I don't want to come across, like I said, I don't want to, obviously everyone's in different situations, but I think that it's really cool that we all have the opportunity to just slow down and take our time and really reconsider everything that we're doing. Me, for example, I don't plan on coming out of this the same as what I went in. I plan on coming out of this with at least a clear direction of what I want to achieve and how I'm going to achieve it, and a time frame to achieve it by. I'm not naive to think that I'm going to come out of this with, a new career and I'm doing this full time and all that sort of, I really don't want to fool myself and be like, Tom, you are going to come out of this making money on YouTube and doing all this sort of stuff. That's not going to happen. It's bullshit. Maybe it'll happen, but it's, not realistic to give myself those, that thought. So what I want to do is come out of this with at least a plan. A direction, a plan, a goal, and a time frame. And I think if I can give you any advice, I gave this advice to a friend of mine today. When she just said to me, she just said openly and honestly, and I'm really proud of her for saying it, is she's just said, I'm having a tough time. Like, I'm really struggling right now. I really don't know what to do. I feel sad. I feel anxious. I feel depressed. I feel horrible. And it's because, like us all, we're struggling at the moment. I just said to her, I was like, I want you to sit down, spend the next hour, spend the next 2 hours, spend the next week. I want you to sit down with a giant piece of paper or a big document on your computer, and I want you to write down every single thing that you want to do. Every single goal you've ever had, every single thing you want to do, every single skill you want to learn, every single job you've ever wanted to have, everything. Put it all down on a piece of paper. And then once you've done that, I want you to pick what you can do right now. Because like I said, action is going to be the answer. Action is what provides you with the answers. If you start doing something now, like I said, I am surprisingly very, very happy right now. I wasn't 2 weeks ago. 2 weeks ago, I was really, really struggling with this whole situation. But I'm finding myself very, very happy and very, very content with what's going on. To bring it back to what I was saying before about actionable, something actionable and something that is relevant to not only this period of time that we're in right now, but the period of time after this and the period of time before. Like I said, I was very, very self-conscious in high school. I was very, very, very aware of what everyone thought of me or what I thought they thought of me. And I pandered to a lot of people. And starting my YouTube channel and starting my Instagram page, I remember even when I started my Instagram page, and this will probably be funny for a lot of you to hear because like right now, I have my podcast, I have my YouTube channel, I'm making an absolute dick of myself a lot of the time on my stories. Like, I just don't really care, and obviously we all care what people think of me, but I don't give it the energy that I used to. I think you will always continue to take in that information, you just won't pay attention to it as much. It's like I'm fully aware of what everyone thinks of me. I'm fully aware of all my old high school friends that think I'm a complete lunatic. I'm aware of all my friends that think everything that I do is a little weird. I'm aware of, how my parents are like, this is, great, Tom, but are you actually going to figure out a way to look after yourself here? I'm aware of, my ex-girlfriends who think that I'm fucking crazy. Like I'm aware of everything that everyone thinks. I'm just not giving it my attention. I'm not giving my energy to trying to fix that. I'm not paying attention to their thoughts. It's like the whole argument that Gary Vee talks about with social media attention is like you should really try to avoid paying attention to the negative and the positive. And I think that's the same for caring about what people think of you. It's like take that information in and understand that they don't know you. It's as simple as that. But back when I was in high school, like I said, I was really, really conscious of what people thought of me. And there was this one particular group of people that I'm not going to name names. I'm not going to name even the group of people, but there was one particular group of people that they were never nasty to me. They were never mean or anything like that. Everyone that I went to high school with is nice. But this group of people was never welcoming to me is probably the best way of putting this. They were always very cliquey and very particular about the way that they do things and blah, 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 and blah, blah, blah. And I guess I didn't fit the mold of what they wanted in a person that they would hang out with. Anyway, regardless. But when I started doing my Instagram stuff, I was very, very, very nervous about doing it. Like I remember when I first made my new page, like I have my own private Instagram. Everyone's had an Instagram account that they've had for years, but I had my main Instagram account that I had for years. And I was so nervous about putting anything out that was at all resembling wanting to be a social media person. Even at that point, even though that I, at that point, didn't really care about that. I was just really sick of my old job. I was really anxious about my future. I was really unsure of what I wanted to do. Like I quit university at this point. I'd been pretty close to quitting my job. And I really, really didn't know what I wanted to do. So it was kind of just a desperate attempt at just keeping myself busy. Photography, honestly. Getting into photography and filmmaking was just me trying to control my emotions. It was like, Tom, just chill the fuck out for a second and be creative. Just focus your energy on this. That was honestly what I did it for. And I started my Instagram account. This is hilarious that this has led to this now, and my entire life has changed because of it, and it's my job now. But I started my Instagram account because I didn't want those people following me. I started my Instagram account. The whole reason I started my Instagram account is because that particular group of people followed me on my private account, and I didn't want them seeing what I was doing. It's crazy that this has gotten to this point now, but that is the whole reason that I started the separate account. And then about a year later, so I'd been doing it for about a year at this point. I don't think I'd had any crazy amounts of success. I think I had like just over 10,000 followers or something like that. And I was at a bar one night, and one of these guys that was part of that group, that was one of the people that had never really spoken, I'd never really had a conversation with. I just got the vibe that they didn't, like the rest of them, didn't really want to be around me. He came up to me in this bar, and he goes, Tom, and we had a conversation briefly, and we spoke and blah, blah, blah. And he said to me, he goes, I really admire your courage, and I really admire what you're doing. And I asked him, I was like, what do you mean? He's like, well, I've always wanted to do like radio. I've always wanted to start a podcast. I've always wanted to do something with my comedy. And I said, why don't you? And he's like, because I don't feel like I'm scared of what people will think. And that moment there made it obvious to me that it's the classic thing of, you really, really never, ever know what's going through someone's head. And everyone is in some way, shape, or form going through the same situation as you are, just in a different manner. And I think from that moment, I just realized that that's what made it click for me. For the rest of my life, I realized that no one cares about what you're doing because no one has the energy to care what you're doing because they're so concerned what they're doing. If you walk into, it's like when I working in a gym made this obvious for me as well. It's like everyone that I speak to about starting to go to the gym, they're so concerned about what people will think of them because they're new to going to the gym. When in reality, no one in the gym gives a shit about what you're doing because they're all concerned with thinking that everyone else is concentrating on them. Everyone in a room is so concerned about what everyone else is thinking of them that no one else is thinking about anyone else. Does that make sense to you? And this moment made it so clear for me. It's that no one cares. No one has the energy to care because everyone is thinking the same thing that you are. This whole episode has been about self-consciousness and getting over that hurdle of giving a fuck about what people think of you. But honestly, like it's something that cripples a lot of people, and it's something that really affects a lot of people, and I wish it didn't. I really, really do wish that it didn't, because it is the factor that stops people from doing so much of what they want to do. Like, this life is so long and so short at the same time. We have so much time to do literally whatever we want. We have so much opportunity, but we don't have that at the same time. It's like, I don't know. I just wish that people, I wish that more people realize that you have an incredible opportunity to do literally whatever the fuck you want to do. Honestly, like, you have such an incredible opportunity to do whatever you want to do. I wanted to finish this episode this week talking a little bit about Instagram, talking about something that I've noticed recently over the last few weeks. I think I definitely got stuck in, and I think it's something that a lot of people get stuck on. The thing with posting to YouTube, and the thing with doing anything on YouTube, is that value is the number one currency for succeeding. Value is the number one currency for succeeding on YouTube. If you post a video that provides value to someone else, if you post something that's entertaining, something that's funny, something that's educational, something that just lightens someone's day, or in whatever way, shape, or form is valuable to another human being, then you will succeed. But I think where that differs is Instagram, you can definitely just post shit and and be very, very successful on Instagram, when in reality, I think your goal should always be to build an audience. And something that I've noticed recently is I started posting, I really started to reassess what I was doing on Instagram. I think for a while I was on the fence about posting literally everything, and I think that there's definitely a side of Instagram for that, but I don't think that's me. Like, my work is very much my personality. So the idea that I'm just going to post whatever the fuck I want is kind of sacrilegious to me. But recently I started just opening up emotionally with my captions and my, even some of the, like, I've started just doodling and sketching and stuff on my images. And it's been remarkable to see how much some of that has really resonated with people, and how much people have appreciated that openness on Instagram. And I think it's made it very, very obvious to me that some of those posts don't get a massive amount of engagement. Some of those posts really don't get anywhere near as much engagement as... There's a group of photos, honestly. There's a group or a style of images that if I post them on my Instagram, they'll get heaps of likes. Like, if I post a certain type of photo, I know for a fact it's going to get 10 to 20,000 likes. But I don't do that. I post this type of image and I get, 50 to 500 messages from people being like, this was what I needed to hear today. Or I really, really appreciate this. Or a lot more people really engage with the image. Maybe not as many people engage with the image, but a lot more people really passionately engage with the image because it resonates with them. And I think a lot of people need to hear this, is that if you're in a position like a lot of people are, a lot of creators, and this is a very niche thing to say because if you're not a creator and you're listening to this, then this might not come across as something you care about. But that, post the stuff that you want to post the stuff that means something to you, and I guarantee it'll mean something to someone else. I guarantee you. If something means something to you, other people are exactly like you, so it's going to resonate with other people. So post the stuff that energizes you, post the stuff that excites you, post the stuff that means something to you, post the stuff that gets you excited, do stuff that inspires you, and in turn you'll inspire other people. Whereas if you just post the same shit every single day, if you just post the same stuff hoping to get the same amount of likes every single day, you literally just end up being a feature page. That's all it ends up being. You just end up being a page that people like because it's got a pretty picture. There's no substance, there's no character, there's no audience that you're building. It's just a bunch of people that see a photo, they like it, and they move on. There's no one coming back to your page because something that you posted on your story really resonates, or something that you posted on your feed really, really resonates. They just keep coming back because the photos look cool and they make good wallpapers on their phone, and that's it. And do you really want to be that type of creator? I'm sure there's a lot of people out there that, they just do social media as a hobby, and getting a lot of likes is really cool because they can brag to some of their friends, and that's it. That's all it goes to. But if you are really concerned with doing something because you are passionate about it, if you are really concerned with building an audience that gives a fuck about you, then try to do the stuff that actually excites you. I had a conversation last night. It comes back to this Zoom call again and again and again. And this guy said to me, he's like, when I post this type of image, I get this many likes. And when I post the images that I want to post, it doesn't get any likes. And I said to him flat out, I was like, of course it doesn't. Of course it fucking doesn't. Why would it? You haven't built the audience to like those sort of images. You've got an audience at the moment that really likes those images and doesn't like you. So if you start posting the stuff that means something to you, that represents you, then people are going to slowly but eventually begin to really fuck with you. It's something that I think a lot of creators really, really struggle with, especially at the moment, because there's a lot of people out there that are really, really killing it on social media right now. There's a lot of people that really, really do well with social media, and then there's a lot of people that don't do well with social media. Every man and his dog has 1,000 followers on Instagram. Literally every mum, every dog, every person, everyone has 1,000 followers on Instagram these days. So having any sort of substantial audience, people automatically assume that that's just reserved for the big guys. That's just reserved for the people that are really, really successful already. Whereas I drew this parallel with someone recently. It's like whenever anyone starts playing basketball, they don't immediately expect to be LeBron James someday. Whenever someone starts acting, they don't immediately expect to be Leo one day, or Brad Pitt one day, or Chris Hemsworth one day. They don't expect to be those people one day, because those people are the 1%, or the 0.0001% of those people in that industry. Whereas whenever anyone starts social media, and I think it's probably got something to do with it's new, or it's probably got something to do with the accessibility. It's like someone like PewDiePie, or someone like Logan Paul, or someone like Sam Calder, or those people, they're so accessible to us. You can send Logan a DM and there's a chance he'll respond, or an even better chance that he'll at least see it. Whereas, you try to yell at Leo through your TV screen whilst you're watching him in a movie, he's a fictional character. Like he might as well be someone that doesn't exist, because you can't access him. He's as close to not a real human being as he is a real human being. Whereas social media, it's so accessible, they're so real, they're so tangible, that anyone who starts social media kind of expects to be them, when we shouldn't. Those are the 1%. Those are the 0.1%. Someone like PewDiePie, someone like Logan Paul, someone like Sam Calder, those guys are the 1% of this industry. Why not try and be the person that makes, 60 grand a year doing whatever they want on social media? Why not try to be the person that makes 100 grand a year or 50 grand a year? Or hell, why not just try to have it as your side hustle and make 30K a year doing it on the side to your full-time job? It's like, I think a lot more people need to consider that as an option. Not that you shouldn't strive to be the best. You should always strive to be the best. But I think a lot of people get discouraged very early on in the process because they see those people and they're like, I'm never going to be like that because I'm not like that person. It's like, of course you're not like that person. Those people are the 1%. Those people are the top, the tippy top of everything that is social media related. Why can't you be down here? Why can't you be someone that just does this passionately, shares something they're interested in, shares their hobby with the world, and makes an extra 60 grand a year? Why can't you do that? It's like, my freelance videography business doesn't make me an incredible amount of money, but I'm very comfortable with the amount of money it was making me. Obviously not right now, but it's not a crazy amount of money. It's not ridiculous, but I'm very comfortable. And I think a lot of people don't realize that, hell, if you had a social media account about football, or if you had a social media account about Pinot Noir, or you had a social media account about photography, and you made an extra 40 grand a year, you would be a very happy human being. But I think a lot of people don't recognize that as an option for them because they're so concerned with the upper echelon of social media fame or social media people. So it's interesting. Like and again, it comes back to the money thing. Like, everyone's so quick to criticize anyone that tries to make any money. So everyone's so quick to criticize anyone that's, releases a preset pack or releases a LUT pack or tries to sell prints or tries to do coaching calls or something like that. When in reality, it's like, why can't we just support each other? Why can't we just decide that if you don't want to buy it, who gives a fuck? Let someone else buy it. Like, it's so much that I could honestly talk about this all night, the whole starving artist thing and social media and that sort of stuff. But it's a wild ride. So just to quickly bring it back to what I wanted to make the focus on, I know we got distracted towards the end there, but to close it out, like, I think it's try to pay attention. Well, here we go. This is a very actionable piece of advice to everyone right now. If you're listening, if you are listening and you haven't read the book, The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck, we all have a massive amount of time on our hands. We all have the opportunity to spend time reading or listening. If you're like me, who can't read for shit, get Audible. I listen to a new book every single month or re-listen to books. Last month, I re-listened to The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck. If you haven't read or listened to that book, go out right now, literally, as you're listening to this on Spotify, swipe up on your phone or go on to a different tab in your browser or whatever, and go to amazon.com.au or .com for wherever you are around the world and buy The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck. Because that book I can honestly contribute a lot of the way I think and a lot of my, the progress that I've made in the last few years of going from someone who was extraordinarily self-conscious to someone who doesn't really pay attention to anyone else other than my own sort of internal dialogue, to that book. That book was incredibly foundational for me into learning about, why it's not valuable to give a fuck, why we can't spend all of our time doing that, why we need to, focus on taking action. And once you take action, literally everything that I've said in this podcast is some way a reference to that book. So if you at all enjoyed this podcast, if you enjoyed anything that I mentioned today and you haven't listened to or read The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck, do yourself a favor right now and go out and get that book. I promise you will thank me for it. Send me a message on Instagram once you've read it or listened to it, or if you have already listened to it, send me a message about it and we can have a conversation about how incredible that book is, because it seriously is so foundational to everything that I do, to the way I think, to the way I act, to the way I do just about everything. It's a incredibly valuable book and I could not recommend it enough. So yeah, there we go. We're at the end of episode 2 of the podcast. I hope you guys really did enjoy it. I honestly do hope you guys are enjoying this format. If you did enjoy this episode, the podcast is now live on iTunes and Spotify from the moment that I'm releasing it. Last week it was on YouTube before it was on Spotify and iTunes, but the podcast is now on Spotify and iTunes. If you're listening on Spotify, go and give me a follow over there. And if you're listening on iTunes, I would really, really appreciate it if you've ever enjoyed any of my YouTube videos, if you've ever enjoyed any of my Instagram content, if you've ever gained any value whatsoever from anything that I've put out online, if you could go to iTunes right now and leave a 5-star review, that would be absolutely incredible, and I would appreciate you more than you can possibly imagine. So if you could do that right now, go to iTunes. Even if you listen on YouTube and Spotify, just go to iTunes, search up my podcast or search up the Real Life podcast. So, God, I forgot the name of the podcast for a second. Go to iTunes, search up the Real Life podcast with Tom Noski and give me a 5-star review. I would really, really, really appreciate it. So, yeah, that's the podcast for today. If you're listening on Spotify, give me a follow. If you're listening on iTunes, subscribe and leave a 5-star review. And if you're listening on YouTube, I appreciate you as well. Leave a comment, leave a like, and subscribe down below. But until next time, I'll see you guys next week.